Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Musical Soundbites. Today we have with us two Singaporean composers, Dr. Chen Zhangyi and Terence Wong, who have used paintings and pictures as inspiration for their music. Welcome and thank you for joining me today in this week's episode of Musical Soundbites.
Thanks for having me.
Chen Zhangyi is a composer and an assistant professor at the Yonatan Conservatory of Music. He has composed many works which have been performed by the Singapore Symphony Orchestra, such as Rain Tree, of an ethereal symphony for the 2016 European tour, and Vanda, a violin concerto which was premiered in 2018. So, Zhangyi, you composed the piece called Life by the River for saxophone. Could you tell me more about it?
The piece Life by the River is actually inspired by a painting, and it was written for this kind of a show that is called Pictures at a Singaporean exhibition at the National Gallery. So I chose this painting by Liu Kang, which is typical of the Nanyang style, which is very colorful, has very bold lines, and it has qualities of a Chinese painting as well as Western painting techniques. So in the painting, I was very inspired by it because it has many different characters in the painting. So on the boardwalk, there's like different people walking down towards the river, and then on the other direction, there is the river flowing down. So there are so many characters there, and I thought, yeah, why don't I create a score that looks like the painting, and then each of these characters can have a short musical motif, and then the player can choose whichever direction and whichever order he wants to start the piece with and go to the next one. Almost like how a person looks at the painting, and your eyes is free to wander, and so that is a little bit of the relationship between the painting and the score and the music.
Since there are so many ways, that you can start the piece, and I guess so many paths that you can go through in the performance of the work, how would you interpret your own work? What would you do?
For me, I think at the foreground of the painting, there's this family of three. They're in like very bright colors. So parents and so father, mother, and a child. So I will start with that kind of family portrait area because it's like the biggest and is the most in your face. And then there are two general flows in the painting, as I mentioned, down the boardwalk on the left side of the painting, and then down the river on the right side of the painting. So these are a few general directions that I would take if I played the saxophone.
Well, another interesting aspect of the score that I found was really interesting was the liberties you gave me as a performer. In the program or in the performance notes where you said something along the lines of where more than one performer can perform this work at a time. How many performers do you think can play this work in a single setting?
A great question. For me, I think it'd be very cool if the number of instruments match the number of characters in the painting. So yeah, that mimics the life of that painting, and like different things happening at the same time. They are in different speeds, they're in different tempos, they're in different ranges of the saxophone. So I think if everyone kind of pick their own motives to play, and you can create some shape to it, and it will sound very busy and very lively and interesting, well, at least to me.
So why the saxophone as a medium for this? Was this a choice that you had? I mean, and don't get me wrong, thank you very much for writing for us.
This is actually my only piece for saxophone. And incidentally, using the saxophone created a little bit of connection with the painting because it can make some like dog-like sounds. There are two dogs in the painting, and also there are some ducks, some animals, animals, some grandmothers feeding the ducks. And also the saxophone has this quality that it's very singing, and sometimes it can be melancholic. So like the fisherman has also a tune, and the different characters have really, I'll try to create different characters. So through the solo saxophone, taking all these different characteristics, I think for me, it was a successful piece.
Now that you mentioned about this dog, barking thing, I think for me, one of the really cool things about this piece is this action that you make us do, which is to lift the leg up, to push the bell into the leg so that we can bend the pitch. Where did you find out about this? Did you have a saxophonist to work with?
Oh yes, I learned it from YouTube. Some jazz saxophonists did this, and yeah, I thought it really sounded like a dog barking, so I used it in the score, and also to make the saxophonist work.
Now, within the painting itself, there are so many different figures and so many different things going on, which then you turned into musical cells. How do you organize this? How do you organize this on a piece of paper?
So I actually wrote the music in little pieces of paper, and I pasted it on 2 pieces of A3 size paper to kind of simulate the format of the painting. So like the fisherman is on the bottom right, and then there is two women washing clothes along the river. There are 2 women feeding the ducks. So visually, this was my compositional process, and then after that, I just typed it out into the musical notation.
Thank you very much for sharing all these experiences with us. Now, you're going to hear 3 very different versions of the same work that I recorded when I was back in Finland, which is the solo saxophone version, a version for saxophone ensemble, and a version for mixed ensemble, so that you can hear the different ways in which other musicians and other instruments play this same work. I hope you enjoy. Next up, we have Terence Wong, who composed Out Do You Do for alto saxophone and tenor saxophone. With me now is Terence Wong, and he's a composer and educator who has written many works for wind bands as well as instrumental works, such as Out Do You Do. So Terence, tell us more about this work that you've written.
Well, Out Do You Do is a piece for alto and tenor saxophone duet, and I wrote it towards the end of last year for a performance at the Royal College of Music where I was a student, and it was in collaboration with an Australian photo festival called the Head On Photo Festival. And The piece is based on a photograph of a man who has a fried chicken bucket placed over his head. And I thought, this is really cheeky, and I wanted to try to translate that cheeky aspect from the photograph into music. But I thought, how do I do that, especially since I was going to write for 2 people, not 1. So I changed it up a bit and I made it into a little competitive piece. I mean, think of all those like Tom and Jerry kind of cartoons, that we used to watch as children, that reveals our age. So it's a competitive piece where they try to outdo each other in many various musical aspects. Like they try to play faster than each other, they try to play slower than each other, they try to articulate harder than each other. So towards the end of the piece, it becomes very, very exciting. And then, well, I'll leave the ending, the description of the ending, a surprise for the viewers.
What was the process like trying to make an oral experience based, or rather inspired by something that was a piece of visual art?
For me, the audience matters a lot. I mean, there are many kinds of composers. There are some that mind what the audience thinks, some that pay no attention to what the audience might feel from the music. But I'm someone who belongs to the former category. So I was trying to imagine, if the audience looked at this painting and the audience heard this piece of music, would they have similar feelings? Might they have similar feelings? Because everyone's different, right? But I can always try to kind of manipulate. That's quite a strong word, but in a sense it's true. I think we composers, we kind of manipulate the way our audiences feel. We manipulate with their emotions through the sounds that we order in time. So I wanted that experience for the audience to be similar to the one they would have had if they saw the photograph. Right. I tried to imagine that as part of my process.
Can you walk me through a bit more about your compositional process? Do you have one?
Yes, I developed my compositional process much more in the past 2 years. And what I usually like to work with cells, like little bits of music, and I like to expand them into a piece. So, like for example, Out Do You Do is derived from the cell of minor 7 chord. So I'm stacking 4 notes on top of each other, and I spread them out as an arpeggio this way rather than vertical. So I came up with many drafts of how I could use this cell, to form all kinds of blocks. It's almost like Lego. If you can think of Lego, you take a piece and then you try to build it in all sorts of manners, and then you see which one works and which ones don't, in the sense that which one fits the narrative I'm trying to tell in the piece, and then I include those bits and I order them and I say, okay, this is the way I want this piece to be, and then the rest of the Lego bits go elsewhere in my hard drive, in a sense. Yeah.
Well, can you walk me through your musical educational journey and your music career?
Well, I started quite young, actually. My parents sent me for music and art classes at 3.5 years old. So it was at the very nearby Yamaha outlet near my house. So my mom would, I don't recall this, but my mom would tell me that I would always come out of every music lesson really happy and every art lesson crying. So she knew that I enjoyed the music lessons a lot more, and eventually I started to play the Yamaha Electone electric organ, and I eventually joined the school band in secondary school at the Catholic High School, and that was where my passion for symphonic and classical music really started and came about. And after that, I made the fateful decision to enter the Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts to study composition under Dr. Zachariah, egged on by my secondary school conductor, really. If not, I don't think I would have known where else to go, really. Well, after that, I embarked on, after national service, I embarked on my bachelor's studies, again at NAFA, but the certificate comes from the Royal College of Music. But at the same time, I also started working as an assistant band instructor. So that was actually the start of my educational career, as in educator's career, teaching, which I found really fulfilling, and I didn't stop all the way until about 2019, and that's when I decided to go for my master's studies in composition as well at the Royal College of Music in London, and I just came back barely 2 months ago.
So what other projects are you working on right now?
Well, I'm currently writing 2 pieces at the moment. One is a piece called Grey for a flautist friend of mine, Clement Lim, who is residing in Germany at the moment. And another piece for the Asian Cultural Symphony Orchestra in Singapore, which will feature a special soloist, which is you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to working on this piece with you. Thank you very
Looking forward
much.
to hearing you perform the piece as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for sharing with us a little bit more about your works and about your life as a composer.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. See you all next time for the next episode of this series, where we'll find out more about composers who have showcased the different musical cultures through the saxophone. See you!